Hello. This session is to provide support for BioB111 and to give information about how to find and reference appropriate information sources to complete the BioB111 research assignment. There are several main parts to the research assignment. The first part of the assignment, Part A, requires you to find information on chemical pathways. The first part of this session is going to give you the most appropriate sources of information to find information on chemical pathways and also the related information of nutritional biochemistry and metabolism. The primary source of information is your prescribed reading for BioB111, Stoker's General Organic and Biological Chemistry, and I'll be showing you several ways to access and reference that particular resource, but there are a variety of other resources on chemistry that will give you similar information or similar supportive information. And I'll be showing you how to find those sorts of information both via the library catalog, but also through library-created library guides, including the Bioscience Chemistry Library Guide and the Nutrition and Nutrition Books Library Guides. So to begin with, one of the major sources of information on appropriate sources for each subject is your subject outline. One of the first things that you should be doing as a student is checking your subject outlines, checking what readings that are required for this particular subject, but also note that in a subject outline, all of the readings are listed and demonstrated in a way that shows how to correctly reference them. So the first thing we're going to do is have a look at LMS and find your subject outline on LMS. From LMS, this is what I was looking at, your subject outline. I'm sure you've all found your subject outline, but if you scroll down to the very bottom, so Stoker's General Organic and Biological Chemistry is the primary prescribed reading for this subject. Here, so that's also going to be one of your primary sources of information to answer all of these questions about the actual chemical pathways. So Stoker's going to be the primary source of information for this. So two things. One, you'd be using that for most of your readings to answer those questions, but also when you're actually referencing in your assignments, because most of the work has already been done on those subject outlines, you could literally just copy and paste that into a Word document for your references. Okay, so normally with the reference list, we start by entitling the page. And that should be centered, and it's the word references. We commonly refer to a reference list, but you entitle the page references, not reference list. But because that work has already been done in the actual subject outline, and that's going to be one of the primary sources of information for this assignment, very simple, just to copy and paste directly from that particular guide. The only thing that's not 100% correct in terms of referencing is that the title should be in italics. But for some reason that didn't copy properly. Okay, so that's the primary source of information for your the first part of the assignment. Now, to access Stoker, it is available as an ebook. So you could search the catalog either by the title or the keyword, or any keywords by the author or by keywords from the title, but you can also search by subject codes. So in this case, if we search for BioB111, it's going to list everything on the subject outline that has been listed as either a prescribed reading or a recommended reading. Almost any of these texts could be useful in researching those chemical pathways. The Stoker is your prescribed reading, so that probably should be the first place to be looking. But you could also find information sources that might give you relevant anatomy and physiology as it relates to chemistry as well. So almost anything in that list could be useful potentially for this assignment. But you can also look to see whether or not they're accessible as an ebook or as a print version. So basically, if you see link to view ebook, that's going to be how to access the ebook version. And the login to any of the ebooks is the same as almost all of your logins at Endeavour in general. So it should be the same login as you use to log into LMS. So that's one of the ways of actually accessing information sources for your subject. An easier way is often to go into the library guides, because the library staff have created guides to help with all of the different subject areas. So for any bioscience subject, if you go into the bioscience library guides, it's further broken down into the discipline areas within biosciences. So chemistry, the page created for chemistry is the first page you'll go to when you go to the biosciences library guides. And within that page is almost anything we can think of that's going to be useful for this area of study. So this central column, particularly on these pages, are all of the ebooks available that are relevant to this subject area. So probably the easiest way of accessing the textbooks on chemistry or relevant to chemistry would be to go to the library guide and simply click the links to those ebooks. A couple of things with ebooks that I probably should point out. It's almost never useful to download the ebook. Normally, that's a complication that you don't need to worry about. I would always suggest to read online rather than downloading an ebook. Also, whilst you can download PDFs of individual chapters, unfortunately, copyright law prevents you from downloading more than 10% of a book. So copyright law basically states you can only copy one chapter or 10%. So if you're downloading individual chapters, sooner or later the database is going to prevent you from actually downloading anything more. So you could probably download one or two PDFs, but after that, the database itself is going to block you. So in general, it's much easier to read online in an ebook than to worry about downloading anything. And that is the entire book. The search within option can be very useful as well. So for example, if we search for carbohydrate metabolism, or anything really from your assignment description, we can search the book for either these words, or if we want to be more precise, we can actually put that in quotation marks, which will tell the database to search only for that as a term rather than the individual words. So if we just did it without those, we would get many more results, but less precise results. Carbo. Okay, so that's 176 results. So any instance in which either of those terms actually appear, which isn't as useful to us. But if we use both within quotation marks, then we can be more precise with our search. Okay, so really finding the chemistry information within that shouldn't be difficult. It should be a matter of really just going to the textbooks that you have on chemistry, particularly the Stoker, and reviewing those pathways or choosing the pathways that you're most interested in. If you wanted to, you could be choosing some of the other textbooks, such as functional biochemistry. Because these assignments are so specifically related to nutritional biochemistry, it could also be useful to be searching our guides for nutrition as well. So if you go into the list of library guides and then into nutrition, and then go into nutrition books, you'll also find a variety of different titles very specific to metabolism and nutritional biochemistry as well. So between your textbooks on chemistry and the textbooks on metabolism or nutritional biochemistry, you should find all of the resources you need to actually support that aspect of the assignment. The second part of your assignment, part B, requires you to review one of 3 case studies and then research that particular case and the diseases featured in those cases and discuss how chemistry relates to those diseases. So the main diseases you'll be looking at are type 2 diabetes and obesity. So the next part of this session is showing you how to find information on those diseases, both general overviews of information on the diseases, but also primary sources of information related to those diseases. So to begin with, we'll be looking at good quality textbooks on pathology and pathophysiology and how to find them. So looking for information on diseases is a little bit different. Once again, I'd be suggesting going to the library guides, and in the bioscience section, there's also a page on pathology. So pathology is the study of diseases. So within that section, I'd suggest you're looking at any good quality pathophysiology text or pathology text. Within this collection, there is 2 that are available as an ebook. So Gould's Pathophysiology is an excellent textbook on pathophysiology. McCanson-Huether's Pathophysiology is a more comprehensive text, but either of those should give you all of the information you need on really the 2 major diseases that you're looking at are diabetes and obesity. So it would simply be a matter of accessing one of those databases, or sorry, one of those textbooks, and then searching for the discussion or all of the information you can find on diabetes or on obesity. So most of the primary information you'll find on your disease states will be in those textbooks on pathology or pathophysiology. However, the assessment also requires you to find at least 2 primary sources of information. The assignment also requires you to find at least 2 primary sources of information. A primary source of information is original information on a particular topic. So as you can see clearly, a research article that is a primary source of information is generally the direct information about an experiment and its results, often written by the researchers who conducted the experiment itself. Types of primary research articles that would be appropriate for health sciences are things like types of studies, particularly case studies or cohort studies, but also randomized controlled trials or other types of clinical trials, and potentially some types of surveys. So in the context of this, if we actually go to the chemistry page, there's a very brief breakdown of primary sources. So here, there's just a brief description of a primary source of information. So one thing it indicates there is that if you're looking at a journal article, look for a couple of different sections, usually methods and results. So any sort of discussion in which the authors are talking about what they did is more likely to be primary. However, that can be a little bit tricky because good quality secondary sources of information, such as systematic reviews or systematic reviews and meta-analyses, also use methods and results to describe their process. But anything that is a review is by its nature secondary. So that can be a little bit confusing. The most important thing is to work out, when you're reading an article, is this something that the authors are talking about that they did, or are they reviewing what other people have done? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so that being said, I'll just give you a quick introduction to our databases and how you would go about searching for primary sources of information. So the major database that Endeavour subscribes to is Ebsco's Discovery Search. So this is what we would suggest you use first, because it is the largest collection of information that we have of any of our databases. So you're more likely to get more results in this discovery search than you would in some of our other more precise databases. So normally, if you're searching for journal articles, if you're searching for primary sources of information, you would start here with Ebsco's Discovery Search. A general theory in searching for information is to start your search broadly and then narrow systematically as you go based upon your results. You could start with a simple search, but I would almost always be using an advanced search function from the very start because it saves time. So if we have a quick look at your assessments and have a look at the case studies, I'm just going to do a simple search. So if we look at diabetes, for example, we could look at diabetes and perhaps carbohydrates in our search. So I'm going to put diabetes in the first search tab. Then this allows us to use multiple search boxes to refine our search, to narrow a search. And is the default because we're almost always going to be trying to refine by searching for things that have only the terms that we want to include, so both of them. So I'm going to search for diabetes and carbohydrates. Other ways that you could change this if you wanted to, the three Boolean operators are and, or not. And is used most commonly because you're usually trying to refine your results. Or is the opposite. It's going to be searching for anything that has either of those terms. Not is used more specifically, and I can show you why in a moment. But normally you would stick with and, start relatively broadly, diabetes and carbohydrates, and then see what results you get. So just with that search, we've got 160,000 odd results, which are far, far too many for us to actually use. So then we have to narrow this slightly. A really quick way of doing that is to scroll down into your results and check the subject descriptions of anything that seems relevant. So this tells us that these are actually parts of subject headings. So we could use carbohydrates as a subject heading, which would be slightly more refined. We could use diabetes mellitus instead of just diabetes. And we can just copy and paste that into the bars to refine our search. Then we can change this to subject terms rather than not selecting any particular field. And that creates a more refined search. It's going to be searching for only things that have those listed as specific subject headings. And our results are now down to 4,000. You could also use diabetes mellitus type 2, which is more specific in the assessment list. So this is saying he's been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So then we can refine this further to diabetes type 2 as a subject heading. Okay, so that gets us a lot of results that are relatively general, but that doesn't actually narrow it to only primary sources of information, which is what you also have to use. Unfortunately, this database doesn't allow us to search only by primary, but we can search by things that we know to be primary sources of information. So a really quick and easy way of narrowing to primary is to search for types of studies that are primary and that describe themselves as such in their title. So for example, many studies are primary sources of information. The majority of randomized controlled trials are going to be primary sources of information. So we can tell the database to search for the word trial in the title field, because a common trend in scientific writing is to entitle the article by the type of study it actually is. So this particular first result tells us that it is a 2-year randomized controlled trial. So that is a quick way of narrowing down to something we know to be a primary source of information on the other elements of information. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, can I just ask a question? How did you get to the Ebsco search?
Okay, so from the library homepage, we then go to databases A to Z. And then on the right-hand side under popular databases is the discovery search. Also, if you're in any of the library guides, the databases are listed on the guides themselves as well. So you could also just be in the chemistry page and click on the link to discovery search. So one thing I wanted to indicate a little bit earlier is why you might use the word not. So this particular result is a little bit confusing because it has the word trial in it, but this is actually a systematic review, which is by its nature secondary. So if you wanted to remove any results that had reviews of any sort, you could tell the database to change this to not and exclude anything that had review in the title of the article. And that's going to cut out basically any result that we know to be a type of secondary source of information. So the majority of things that are left should be trials, randomized controlled trials, not reviews of randomized controlled trials. And that should limit to a good number of primary sources of information, in this case, 150 odd. Now, your actual reading on the chemistry pathways and on the pathology of the disease you choose should give you more specific search terms to help you narrow even further. But the most important thing in this case is to find at least 2 relevant journal articles to support your discussion of the cases. Does that make sense? You could also change this. Instead of trial, we could be searching for study. Once again, searching for study in the title. And once again, it's giving you different types of things: randomized controlled studies, randomized studies, cohort studies. So all of these are likely to be types of primary sources of information. One aspect before I finish that I would like to mention is referencing journal referencing journal articles tends to be more complicated than books. But all of the information that you need to reference journal articles is contained in this detailed record of the articles. And your assignment description itself actually provides good examples of how you go about referencing journal articles. So for example, this is an example of how to reference a particular journal article. It's not 100% correct because this should be presented as a URL, but this is an example of how to correctly reference a DOI, if that makes sense. So yeah, that is the example that you would follow. We do also have an entire page devoted to referencing. So when you find your journal articles, all of the information you need to actually reference those articles would be found in this detailed record, and then the actual APA referencing guide will tell you how to format that information. Does that make sense?
We can also make an appointment with a librarian and get our references checked, right? Whether they're correct.
You can, yes. So once again from LMS, so if I go back to the LMS dashboard, there is a help tab, and in consultations, if you scroll down to the very bottom, there is a booking form for booking library consultations. So you are most welcome to contact the virtual librarian service to get information, although that would probably be more for shorter questions. If you actually want us to review an assignment and you're referencing for an assignment, then I would definitely suggest booking a longer consultation via that LMS consultations tab. And once again, we can't actually do the referencing for you, but we can review a draft of your assignments and basically tell you exactly how you should be going about referencing and what you're getting right and wrong. So normally for that reason, particularly in your first year, I'd be suggesting, if you possibly can, get a draft of your assignment finished a week before it's actually due. Things are almost always due on a Sunday, so if you can get something done early in the week before that, the Monday or Tuesday. Another helpful tool that you could use is Studiosity. Studiosity is more about academic writing. So the library staff can help with your referencing, but we tend not to be helping with the actual academic writing processes of your assignment work. For review of the academic writing of your drafts, you would use Studiosity. For your referencing, contact the library. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was the majority of what I wanted to cover for this session, really just indicating the major areas that you would look for information and then how you would go about accessing those sources. If you have any questions, feel free to contact any of the library staff. And if you'd like to book longer consultations, feel free to do that as well.